Good morning. I want to welcome you to another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Today is Wednesday, December the 27th, 2023. I want to first start off by wishing everyone who had a good Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, because Kwanzaa is currently going on at the moment. But whatever holiday if you celebrate these holidays, I hope you have a wondrous and prosperous holiday, or had one, however you want to say it. But today's topic is going to be a couple of topics, and it's going to be regarding football, obviously. One is going to be, where do I think is going to happen with Caleb Williams, and why I don't think Caleb Williams is the generational quarterback people are making him out to be, but where I think he's going to end up at. And then I also want to talk about why Cam Newton was correct. Let's start with Caleb Williams. Now, I'm gonna be honest. I was a big fan of Caleb Williams. There are things that he did this past season, personality-wise, that turned me off of him. But I'm gonna put my biases to the side. And everybody was talking about him as a generational elite quarterback. And when the games that I saw, it confirmed the same biases that I've heard. So I thought that he was a generational elite quarterback. And I know he's going to end up being the first quarterback taken. That's not going to be in dispute. Just the question is just who's going to take him. And right now, Chicago owns the first pick. They're going to end up being the first. They're going to have the first pick. They got like a 99% chance of having the first pick. So let's just assume they're going to have the first pick. But you'll say, okay, well, why isn't he elite or generational? When I think of generational, I think of guys who have not only great college careers, and he had an excellent one, who put up great numbers, which he did, but guys who, in big moments, they rise up to the occasion. That's what I think of when I think of elite or generational. Trevor Lawrence, back in college, especially his freshman year, he rose to the occasion. To me, that makes you generational. Against top-tier competition, you rise to the occasion. Joe Burrow, even though he wasn't considered generational, but he had one of those years where he rose to the occasion. Now, you say, well, what about Caleb Williams? Well, why isn't he that guy? Or in your opinion, he's no longer that guy. Here's why. Because there was a disturbing stat that came out, but the media conveniently, they don't talk about it. And I wonder why. But against non-top 25 teams, he's played 23 games. So that means if you're not in the top 25, he's played about 23 of those games. His completion percentage is 70%, or 70.3 to be exact, but we're going to round down to 70. Anything below 5 you just round down. Anything above 5 or above, you round up. So 70%. So 70 to 73, 70 to 70.3% is his completion percentage, which is great. He throws for about 317 yards a game, 78 touchdowns to 7 INTs. Now, that's against non-top 25 teams. In other words, in college football, the bad teams. That's the equivalent to the bad teams in the NFL. But what happens when he's playing the top 25 teams? Now, the top 25 teams, they're not all great. They're either average to great. So you're going to get an average team to a great team. If you're not in the top 25, for the most part, you're below average, generally speaking. But in college football, the top 25 is anywhere from average to great. And against those teams, he has played 5 games. His completion percentage is only 51.4%. Or as I like to say, 51%, but we're going to say 51.4. We're going to be exact there. So against the non-top 25 teams, he's 70.3%, great. But against the top 25 teams, the average to above average teams, Only 51.4%. That's a big drop off. He's only passed for 172 yards, 6 touchdowns to 6 INTs. Now, that's very, very important because that tells me that against the really good teams, he's lousy. His numbers are lousy. And notice we didn't talk about wins and losses because there's more that factors into wins and losses. Than just quarterback play. Um, and so I was just looking up something real quick. Um, but anyway, I was just looking up something real quick. But no, so it just goes to show you that this that's not generational. I'm sorry, that's not generational numbers. Against the bad teams, yes, he put some generational numbers. But against the good teams or average to really great teams, no, that's not generational. But that's not what this is going to be about. The reason I'm bringing up Caleb Williams is because I'm going to make a prediction. He's not going to be a Chicago Bear next year, next season. That's going to be my prediction. And you say, well, how did you come to that conclusion? I believed up until recently, I believe that there was going to be a big decision Ryan Poles was going to have to make whether to keep Fields or draft Caleb Williams because I thought it would just come down to those two options. However, some recent developments have taken place that the media, the the broad media, sports media, conveniently is keeping quiet on it, at least for now. And that is, someone made a tweet, and who that someone is really doesn't matter. But someone made a tweet on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, saying that the Bears do not need Caleb Williams, keep Justin Fields, and draft Marvin Harrison. Now a lot of people have made those type of tweets, and then there's others who made the tweets of drafting Caleb Williams. So, but a lot of people have made those tweets. But for Caleb Williams to like that tweet, when you like a tweet or a photo, you're sending a message, especially if you don't quickly unlike it. So, because sometimes you could like something by accident. I've had that happen to me where I clicked on something. I didn't mean to click on the heart like I like it or the thumbs up like I like it. And somehow I ended up clicking on it and I immediately noticed it and I would take it off. But he hasn't done that. From my understanding, it's still up. So you're sending a message when you like a tweet or like a photo or like whatever. You're sending a subliminal message. And now it's being reported in the New York Post. And no matter what I think of the Post, it is a reputable newspaper. Um, but Caleb Williams' father was talking to Archie Manning. Now you say, okay, what would he be talking to Archie Manning? Just you thinking, well, they just shooting the breeze, anything like that? No, he's talking about, because remember, when Eli Manning came out in 2004, Archie Manning basically, the Chargers owned the number one pick, the San Diego Chargers, because they were San Diego at the time. And the father let it be known that his son will not play for the Chargers, that they wanted to go to the New York Football Giants. And ultimately, in that draft, the trade was made. and the rest is history. And Archie Manning was basically the linchpin of it, the centerpiece of it. So for Caleb Williams' father to be talking to Archie Manning and then he coming out making statements, well, we want to be happy with the team we're going to. And everybody knows that, well, Chicago's going to own the number one pick. That's been known for weeks, if not months, that Chicago's going to own the number one pick because Carolina has just been awful this year. So it's like a foregone conclusion that Chicago's going to be the team. So for the dad to come out and say, well, we want to, we have to believe in the city and the team that we're going to, that they have a history of developing quarterbacks and doing well, because there's a lot of teams that are drafting at the top that are bad at either bad record, well, not only because they have a bad record, but they have basically a history of not developing quarterbacks. Well, there's two teams that draft near the top, and this one happens to be one of them, the Bears, who have not a history of of developing quarterbacks. So I just found that curious that now that report is coming out that he's talking to Archie Manning. So I believe, and this is just my prediction, he's going to, and when it gets around that draft time, sometime from February, from when the combine start to April, when the draft takes place, it's going to come out. This is my prediction that he does not want to play for the Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams, and that they want to go to say, well, I took a look at the, and this is what I was looking at real quick, the draft order. The NFL draft order. And guess who's drafting 5th overall, which is very similar to what happened in 2004? The New York Football Giants. And I think, this is going to be my prediction. And I could be wrong, but I believe I'm going to be right on this one. We're going to have a repeat of 2004, where the Williams family going to let it be known, openly known, that they don't want to be a Bear and they want to be a Giant. I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, and why? And again, because there's too much similarities, and not only that, again, why is Caleb Williams' father talking to Archie Manning about dictating what teams he's going to and how to all of that? If you were content, in other words, you're going to play where you're drafted, because a lot of players and their family, hey, wherever we're drafted, that's where we're going to play. But in this particular case, the Williams family have a lot of leverage. Why? Because number one, everybody and their mother wants them. Now, me, I have a different view, but everybody and their mother wants them. So, and two, he is coveted. So, if you're Ryan Poles, the GM of the Bears, you better be prepared that you might not end up with Caleb Williams. Because I don't believe Ryan Poles, if it comes out that Caleb Williams and his family let it be known that they don't want to play in Chicago, I don't think Ryan Poles is going to force them to play in Chicago. First of all, it would be dumb to do that. You will be setting the franchise up to fail if you do that. So don't do that. So you're either going to keep Justin Fields or you're going to come with a plan B, which is to get another quarterback. Still trade Justin Fields and get another quarterback. Now, I believe it's going to be one of those two scenarios that's going to play out. I do not believe Caleb Williams will be a Chicago Bear come next season. The tea leaves are showing. There's too much tea leaves showing that that's going to most likely be the case. Now that brings me on to why Cam Newton was correct. Okay. To give you an understanding, we have to go back a couple of weeks when Cam Newton was on this podcast or whatever, and he made some controversial statements referring to game managers versus difference makers. And obviously, game managers, he was referring to, he mentioned the Brock Purdy's, the Tua Tagovailoas, I guess that's how you pronounce it, Tua T. Okay, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, And he took a lot of ire from a lot of people, including even me, but for different reasons. I was angry with him, not because what he said wasn't true. It was true what he said, but I felt he shouldn't have said it because I felt it was disrespectful. And not only that, and he ultimately expounded more. He came back and expounded more after there was a lot of blow up on what he was really saying. And if he would have said it right the first time, I believe a lot of this stuff would have went away and it wouldn't have been nothing to it. But when he called Purdy and all these guys game managers, it made it sound if he was speaking from a negative when because it was brought up about the MVP. And see, what Cam was basically saying was that the NFL does not give MVPs or shouldn't be giving MVPs to game managers. Because usually MVP goes to difference makers, regardless of what position they're playing. But definitely, if we're talking quarterback, difference makers. And he's saying that the guys who are right now with the leading MVPs, Tua T, Dak, and Dak was the leading in the doghouse at the time, or should I say, in the racehorse. And basically, he was the leading bet getter at the time to be the MVP, followed by um, Purdy and then Tua, and so Cam's argument was really none of these guys should really be MVP. He said he would give it to Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey is the real MVP on that team. But this is not about Christian McCaffrey. This is about what Cam said about game managers versus the difference makers. And so Cam Newton turned out to be correct. When on the big stage, because everybody was picking, most people was not everybody, most people was picking San Francisco to win. And I can understand why. On Christmas Eve, Christmas night at home, 8 p.m. game, start time. It was set up for San Francisco to win. San Francisco was dominating everybody in the last 4 or 5 weeks. Philadelphia, they dominated everybody in the last, a lot of people in the last 4 or 5 weeks. And so people thought that they would beat or dominate the Baltimore Ravens. And when Baltimore Ravens went in there and smacked them around, and there went Brock Purdy's MVP hopes, it basically further confirmed what Cam Newton was saying, that when you got a game manager versus a difference maker, the difference maker is the one you give the MVP to. Because he's going to be he's the one who has to carry the team. He's the one who's going to be the highlight, the star, the guy, the man. Purdy is not that on his team. Even George Kittle acknowledged that a couple of weeks ago when he basically said Christian McCaffrey is the star on the team or the best player on the team. So really, that means in a roundabout way, what he was saying was that Cam was correct. No matter what you may personally feel about Cam or what he said, you can't deny that what he said was correct. And so it was an embarrassing display. And see, a lot of people are going to say, well, Purdy failed. Purdy did X, Y, Z. This went wrong. No, this was all on Kyle Shanahan. And I'm going to tell you why. Kyle Shanahan doesn't learn from his mistakes. And if you make the same mistake over and over again, this is the definition of insanity. His picture should be put up next to the word insanity. Because why? If Christian McCaffrey is your best player, and every team goes into the game to try to stop Christian McCaffrey, shouldn't you turn around and hand the ball off to Christian McCaffrey and force the Ravens to beat you at your strength? Instead, you try to prove that Purdy was MVP guy because he was going up against former MVP, unanimous MVP, and he tried to prove that Purdy was better, and it turned out no, you proved just the opposite. That Purdy is not that dude. And to me, I blame on Kyle Shanahan. Now you say, Jermaine, well, what mistake did he make before? He made that same mistake back in the Super Bowl a few years prior when they were playing up against the Kansas City Chiefs. The 49ers was moving the ball. The 49ers was dominating the game. All he had to do was just keep running the football, and the Kansas City would have lost that game. But what did Kyle Shanahan did? He decided he would put the ball in Jimmy G's hand, Jimmy Garoppolo's hand. And Jimmy Garoppolo went in through the not that it was an interception, but he went in through an incompletion. And basically he helped allow Kansas City to get back in the game. And I remember the Honey Badger, okay, who played for Kansas City at the time, said to Kyle Shanahan, thank you for putting the ball in Jimmy G's hand. Because why? We couldn't stop the run. But by you putting the ball in his hand and trying to force him to be something he isn't, you lost the game that, quite frankly, you should have won. And this is not the first time or the second time he's made that mistake. Let's go back a few years prior before that, when he was this time now the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan had an MVP season. Matt Ryan, who is a difference maker himself, he had one of those years where, I mean, he was one of the best quarterbacks. So in the Super Bowl, they had the 49ers, I mean, not the 49ers, sorry. They had the Patriots beat. I mean, Matt Ryan threw that ball to the sideline and Julio Jones made that beautiful catch. Now, all you had to do was run the football. And what did you try to do? You tried to make Matt Ryan the hero. He took a bad sack, ultimately ended up out of field goal range, and of course, the rest is history. They lost the game. And then Seattle, a few years prior to that, made a similar mistake where they just came off winning a Super Bowl in 2014. I mean, not in 2014, I'm sorry. 2013, I believe it was. And they 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 won the Super Bowl with the Legion of Boom. I mean, they just dismantled the Denver Broncos. The next year they come back, they're in the Super Bowl again. They're at the 2-yard line. And instead of turning around and giving the ball to beast mode, who was Seattle's best offensive player at that time? Pete Carroll tried to make Russell Wilson the hero, outthought the room and tried to have Russell Wilson throw a touchdown, and instead Russell threw an INT. Game over. And Seattle was never the same again. And the moral of these stories is give the ball to your best player and let them make the plays. Remember, it's players, not plays. Let your players win the games for you. Get the ball into your best player's hand. Don't try to make somebody be something they aren't. Purdy proved in that game, folks, he's a game manager. He's not a difference maker. And you don't need a difference maker to win a Super Bowl or to win a lot of games. But you're going to need somebody who's a very good game manager. As long as he got all the other pieces, you can win with somebody who's just a game manager. You can win with the Dak Prescotts, the Brock Purdy's, the Tua T's, if everything else is right. So I don't see game manager as a negative because every quarterback's job is to manage the game. So, I mean, It was a humbling loss by the 49ers, and it is what it is. I want to thank you for watching another segment of the Jermaine Brown Sports Talk Show. Have a good day.